Good afternoon. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Live. I'm Travis Copenever. I'm joined today by my colleague, Jennifer Nemain.
Yes.
So you can say your own name.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about the social equity program and some details that were released by the Marijuana Regulatory Agency that were released yesterday.
Yes, we are very excited to see the new program details being released. This is something that isn't a surprise. It was actually mandated in the Michigan Taxation and Regulation of Marijuana Act, right? I got that right? Okay, there we go. So this is something that was actually mandated in the law. When the voters in the state of Michigan passed Prop 1, there was an language in the law that says that the state had to come up with programs to benefit communities that had been disproportionately impacted by the marijuana prohibition and enforcement and the war on drugs. So they're trying to find ways in order to basically rectify this issue that we've been seeing for decades. And it was a tall order, but I think Michigan really did a wonderful job in creating a good, solid start to their social equity program. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And that's important to emphasize. This is a start. The full program details, still appear to be underway. If you go to the Marijuana Regulatory website's page on the social equity program, you'll see that between yesterday and today, new resource sections are being added. And I think when we were reviewing the emergency rules earlier, when we were interviewing Director Brisboe, he specifically mentioned how this social equity plan is going to be pulled out of the emergency rules, treated as a separate thing that they could work with. And I think we're kind of seeing why. This is very much a start. And if you look to what the MRTA says, the Marijuana Regulation, Taxation, Marijuana Act. I don't know why we always try to say that.
I know.
It specifically says that the department, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, needs to identify communities disproportionately impacted and then create positive benefits to those communities. And there wasn't a lot of guidance for the MRA on how to do that. So you were actually a part of some of these groups. They did two primary things really to figure out what this program was going to look like. They had an online survey where they asked everyone who had interest in this program to give them some advice, and they also talked to the work groups.
They did. So there was 150 people that were brought to various or selected for work groups a couple of months ago, and at those sessions they asked the attendees, what do we do? We're mandated to create this program, but what does that look like? How do we pick these communities? How do we identify who qualifies for this program? And once we figure out that they're qualified, what do we offer them? Do we give them training? Do we give them a reduction in fees? So there was a lot to try to figure out, wade through, and determine what is going to be a good fit for the state, what's going to help the industry, and what's going to help these communities. So those work groups were fantastic, and I was really happy to see that a lot of the suggestions made it into this. Yeah,
so let's talk about that. So what the state's done to start this program is they've identified 19 what they're calling disproportionately impacted communities. And taking in that feedback and to start this program, they basically determined what those communities were going to be on two factors. Factor number one, they looked at the marijuana conviction rates in the state of Michigan and identified communities where those conviction rates were higher than the state average. So that was kind of criteria number one. Then when they had a list of those communities, they took the communities that were in the top 30% of having the worst poverty levels. So I believe they took the giant list of communities and the ones that had higher than the federal average for poverty basically was how they started with their initial 19 disproportionately impacted communities.
Right.
And it's important that we, and the reason we're focusing on what a disproportionately impacted community is because the way this program is going to work is if you are either from one of these communities or if you're going to be opening a business in one of these communities, there's going to be program benefits specifically designed to help that community, right?
Right, but I think it's important to note that you have to maintain residency there or have been a resident for the last 5 years in order to be a qualifying applicant for this program. So it's not like you or I could just up and move to the city of Detroit and start a business there and qualify for this program. So they're looking to make sure that the people that are being benefited are the people who lived in those communities for a substantial period of time before being eligible, which I think is wonderful.
Right. Definitely. So what this program is going to start out doing is it's, for those communities, there's going to be a couple primary benefits created. The first will be primarily education. There's going to be MRA trained social equity specialists that are going to be sent to these communities. They're going to provide things like educational information, application assistance, other training, creating programs and seminars and things. And they're going to be doing this all before November 1st when the state starts accepting these applications to kind of give businesses in these communities, individuals in these communities, a little bit of assistance in just knowing what they're supposed to do, knowing what the benefits available to them are. And then probably the second most impactful factor of this initial program is there's up to 6% off of a reduction in your application fees depending on how many of the qualification factors you're hitting. They're starting with, and again, this is all just the starting point for the program. So while it's going to be pretty limited to start, there's probably going to be other assistance that evolves out of this program because it's not like disproportionately impacted communities are only going to benefit from having people from those communities or businesses in those communities.
Right.
But to start, we're going to talk about like the big tentpole items, and the one that's probably most exciting is a reduction in application fees. There's really 3 criteria that you may or may not qualify for, and depending on who you are, you might hit all 3 of these. The first is, as Jennifer mentioned, if you have been a resident in one of these identified disproportionately impacted communities for at least 5 years, you qualify your business for up to 25% off of the application fee.
Not just the application fee, but also renewal fees and the initial licensure fee, which can be substantial once you add all of that together. So 25% off for the application fee and the fees moving forward, which is substantial. And then I believe that if you are also a member that has a marijuana related conviction and you were a resident of that community for 5 years, so basically take the 25% off that we just talked about, and then if you happen to also have a marijuana related conviction on your record, then that would qualify you for another 25% off.
Correct. And it's important to note that you can't just have a minority owner. You can't just be a 1%
Right.
owner and get that reduction. You do need to be a majority owner. And, we assume that means 50% or more, but, we might get more information about what they consider qualification or not. And it's important to remember, if you are both, then it's 25 and 25, so that would be 50% off your application fees. The final one is if you are from one of these communities, you've lived there for 5 years, and you've also been a primary caregiver in the 2008 program for at least 2 years in a time period between 2008 and 2017, you also qualify for a 10% reduction in fees. And if you are able to hit all of those, that's how you get to the 60% reduction. So that's the reduced fees portion, and it's going to hopefully encourage people making opportunities for businesses in these communities and employing and having people as part of the ownership team that are from these communities. But it's also hopefully going to make it just a less of a financial burden. If you are one of these individuals from these communities, you'll be paying significantly less in your application fees, which are usually quite a roadblock for a lot of groups that I know we've worked with.
Absolutely. So that is probably the most concrete information we have right now for this program. That being said, the state is rolling out additional information all the time regarding this program. I know it updated their website, like you mentioned just today, and so we'll be looking forward to giving you more information on that. But even if you find out that you don't qualify for this program and you still are looking to be in one of those communities, or you are looking to do an adult use facility, period, social equity is still going to matter to you. Social equity is a requirement now for the new adult use application materials that are going to be rolled out. You actually have to create a narrative, right?
Yep, you do. So, and this applies to any adult use license type. So not just growers and marijuana retailers,
Yes.
But also event operators, excess growers. Pretty much any time you're seeking a adult use marijuana license, one of the application requirements is going to be a social equity plan. And one of the interesting things we've heard Director Brisboe talk about since the emergency rules came out is the marijuana regulatory agency is really looking to the applicants to help them really understand what those plans can be. Nick and I did a show on Illinois' social equity programs and some of the good ideas coming from that state. But one of the real distinctions in Michigan compared to Illinois is that Michigan applicants really have an opportunity to define what that social equity plan is going to be for themselves, at least in these first initial couple years here for the program. If you have an idea about how you think your company can provide a social equity benefit to a disproportionately impacted community, you're not basically forced by the state of Michigan to do something in a certain way. You can organically create a program as part of your plan. You can come up with something that might be actually unique to and feasible for your company to do to touch on the subject. And I think the MRA is really looking for some of those ideas to come from the industry. You know, too often, I know I'm going to go off talking again.
You're fine.
It's too often, you know, we create these really complicated regulatory structures for these new industries, and as our regulations and laws get more and more complicated, that translates into cost. You know, if the state of Michigan says you are mandated to do something, you either are able to do it or you can't be an applicant.
Right.
So I'm sure when you know, some of these plans start coming before the MRA, as they start receiving applications, we'll get to a point where some of the best practices or some of the ideas MRA is being presented with will eventually become requirements or at least suggestions and things.
Right.
But right now, if you are going to be a licensee, whether you are a large grow coming from the medical marijuana system, you know, hoping to do dispensaries throughout the state, or if you're going to be a micro business or a smaller Class A grow, you are going to be required to do one of these plans, and you're required to explain how your business is going to provide a benefit to a disproportionately impacted community. So it's time to start thinking about that. Do you have ideas? I know we've been thinking about that internally.
Right, absolutely. So I think one of the best opportunities right now would probably be business mentorship.
Yep.
If you are currently operating as a medical marijuana provisioning center and you can identify a social equity applicant or new business in one of these disproportionately impacted communities, and you can offer business mentorship or additional resources for them. This way, they have the support that they need. It is a way for you to give back, but it isn't entirely burdensome on you or on the system. Everybody wins there, and I think that's the sort of partnership that the state is really going to start seeing more of and prioritizing probably.
Yeah, if you're a marijuana retailer, another idea we've been kicking around with some of our clients starting to think about this is, you know, maybe you make a commitment to source a lot of your products from businesses in these disproportionately impacted communities. Even if those businesses aren't necessarily taking advantage of application reductions and things, when a business is operating in a community, it's creating jobs in that community.
Right.
So if you're able to provide some financial support in the form of what you're doing anyway, buying stock for your shelves, you know, that's going to be something that I would be working into a plan.
Right.
Other ideas might include, you know, if you have the space for it, you know, maybe you create, you know, a separate unit in your facility and you become a landlord too. Maybe you give them a favorable, you know, starting lease arrangement.
Right.
You know, there's the world is really up to you. You can be creative about it, and I think you'll find that if you implement some of these ideas as you're required to, you might help drive the state in the direction of what might eventually become requirements for everyone.
Right, right, absolutely. So the bottom line is the world is your oyster, and you can pick and choose what that looks like for you and for your business, what makes sense. And it's really an exciting opportunity. We aren't having the state come down and say, you absolutely must check all these boxes. You create those boxes for yourself. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the creative opportunities that some of these businesses come up with.
Exactly. So what can we expect, you know, over the next few months here leading up to the point where the state starts accepting applications? So as we mentioned earlier, the state's setting up specific training events, specific programs for people in these communities. They're going to be going to these communities, it sounds like, multiple times to help explain application materials, assist people in filling out applications, etc. But we also know that the Marijuana Regulatory Agency is reaching out to you know, medical marijuana facilities, private individuals in the private sector. And there's going to also be support through MRA for educational materials and things of that nature.
Right, and they're also reaching out to professionals who work in this industry in ancillary businesses. So attorneys or also CPAs, they're going to have a group of individuals who are willing to work with these applicants and make sure that they understand what's going on and how to get across that finish line. So to have a pool of resources, not only just at the departmental level, but also to have a support network that they're building, I think is wonderful. And I'm really excited that CLG will be joining that pool of a support team. Yes.
Definitely. So it's not just the Marijuana Regulatory Agency buying through their design of the social equity program. The state's also going to be bringing in all of the other state departments that cannabis applicants going to need to operate with. The Department of Treasury is going to be, involved to explain how tax situation is going to be working. Environmental departments, the Bureau of Fire Safety, the Bureau of Building Safety are going to be talking about what the inspections are for your facility as you build them out. I think wage and hours coming in. There's a whole list on their website, and when you submit a cannabis application, as you probably hear us talk about in all kinds of different contexts, it's not just obviously the Marijuana Regulatory Agency is the most direct department you're working with, but there are a lot of factors involved for opening your business. If you think about what your application requirements are, you need an architect, a CPA, an attorney. You need probably to work with construction people in most cases, and then you need to comply with all the laws of the state. You need workman's comp insurance. You need, the premises and casualty insurance. There's a lot of business planning that goes into putting an actual business together that is outside the scope of just submitting your state license.
Right, and to have the state say, we understand that is something that these people are also going to need assistance with, and we are going to proactively partner with these other agencies and come up with a plan for them and get the resources and the education that they need in order to be successful is huge. I think it's wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this program roll out.
Definitely. So based on what has been announced so far, we do expect there to be continuing information coming through the pipeline as they flesh out this program. We expect to hear some announcements for some of the first actual events they'll be holding soon, and we'll obviously be promoting that on the show, talking about it. We know our show is going to be on the slightly shorter side today, so if you are able to join us, please throw questions, comments in the Facebook comment section there. We're always happy to go through those and try to answer them when we can. And we'll be back next week with another Cannabis Live. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys.
Thank you.
See you next time.